Maddie and Keith here with us to celebrate the Scottish non-chosen family. I've been a big fan of Maddie's work since I read it in Dot a couple of years ago, and then I handsold it to every single person who came through the workshop. And you. So I was really pleased when we found out that we could do it in Wuthering Dykes to celebrate this tonight. So thank you so much for coming. If you would like to join Wuthering Dykes, have a little chat with these lovely people here, Sophie and Nell, at the end of the evening. And they'll also be taking pictures for socials, but if you would rather not be in any pictures, feel free to give them a shout and make a room with them. And in the meantime, I just thought I would introduce the lovely Annie Viewers. Annie is a writer, editor, and journalist based in Edinburgh. She is the author of BFFs, The Radical Potential of Female Friendship, with 4 Inc. for the near future, foreseeable future, which we will have copies of to sell at the end. She also writes extensively on film, literature, and cultural politics for publications such as ID, Little White, Lies, Another Magazine, goddamn RIP, The Big Issue, and Girls on Tops. So please join me in welcoming these lovely people here. So, as I forgot to say, there are no fire alarms scheduled for tonight. The fire exit is just through there. So that's it. Sorry, guys. Goodbye.
That's actually great because I would have told you to go through that. So I'm really proud of that. Thanks, Matt. I'm really, really excited to be joined by Madeleine Gray to launch Chosen Family, which I read in a 24-hour period because I could not put it down. So the way this is going to work, I'm going to introduce Maddie. Maddie's going to do a wee reading for us, and then we'll have a chat. And I'm going to leave around like 10-15 minutes at the end for you guys to have questions. So please do think of your questions. Don't make me pick on you. I will do it, and you won't enjoy it. So, Madeleine Gray is a writer and critic from Sydney. Her first book, Green Dot, was published in 2024 and became an instant international sensation. That's so sexy. It was shortlisted for Debut of the Year at British Book Awards 2025 and awarded the 2025 Russell Prize for Humour Writing Award. Television rights have been optioned by Drama Republic, the production company behind One Day. Please join me in welcoming Maddie. Your book, back to you.
Thank you.
Are you going to do your reading?
Okay. Yes, I've never been to Scotland before, and I was just really hoping someone would say like, "Oh, we something." It's already happened, so thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm going to read a scene kind of early on in the novel where we have our 2 protagonists, Eve and Nell, and they are just meeting for the first time in early high school. I think that's enough. Okay. I'll be going for a swimming lesson. At 2:15 p.m, the school's pool changing room is vibrating with the high-pitched screams of the girls, the smell of chlorine and the texture of wet band-aids on soaked concrete. It's easy to see which of the girls have already learned to hate their bodies and which are still happily ensconced in the unblushing shamelessness of being 12 years old. Georgia Smith, for example, is uncomfortable in her body, but as she is on the fringes of a popular group, she must feign nonchalance. Part of being popular is projecting body confidence and making other people feel bad. Nevertheless, the fact that she's clearly sucking in her stomach betrays her anxiety. Alex Robbins is skinny, blonde, and hot for a 12-year-old. As such, she parades her near-naked body around the changing room in no particular rush to cover up. Minnie Parker, the athlete, is not exactly popular, but she is fit and therefore slim, and this counts for a lot. She sees her body as a tool and changes into her suit accordingly with dexterity and purpose. Nervously trying to get into her new bathing suit without displaying her burgeoning pubic hair to the mob of preteen girls, Eve is firmly on the ashamed team. In reality, her build is average, but she's sure she's fat. She also has very short hair, which she personally likes and feels cleaner this way, but she understands that others construe this as evidence of her being a freak. Even the hairdresser at Just Cuts was visibly taken aback when Eve requested the chop. Eve takes off her uniform and places it on the wooden bench that skirts the periphery of the changing room. She evades eye contact with the others as she slides her one piece up over her undies and then awkwardly pulls her undies off one leg at a time under her swimmers. She tries to avoid the inevitable camel toe that accompanies this move, but fails. When her undies are off, she quickly rearranges her costume and then glances around to make sure no one has observed her prudishness. Thankfully, nobody's looking at her. She has gotten through the first trial of PE. Except that she has not. Because sitting at the back of the changing room, already in her swimmers, because she's been wearing them under her uniform all day, is Nell. And Nell has been watching. Mrs. Klein, the PE teacher, orders the girls to each line up behind one of the diving boards. This is where the body comparisons can truly flourish. They're like models on a go-see, except they are also the judges. They waddle towards their respective boards, side-eyeing one another. It is cold, the wind like a whip. Their nipples poke through their costumes and they hate this. Girls chatter to each other in clusters, but Eve stands apart. She does not yet have any inside jokes to revel in, nothing that could be whispered up the line to squeals of delight. She places her hands in front of her legs, trying to hide her nascent pubic hair from the madding crowd. She has noticed that none of the other girls seem to have any. Is she simply further developed, or are they all waxing already? Eve's mum wouldn't let her wax, said pubic hair was natural and beautiful. Eve is now considering whether it be natural and beautiful to commit matricide. Once again, Nell is noticing all of this. She's noticing the awkward angle at which Eve has placed her arms. She's seen the wisps of brown curl tufting out, brushing Eve's inner thighs. Part of her wants to protect Eve from what she knows is going to happen. Another part of her wants to see how Eve will respond when it does. Alex Robbins, with her tanned, live limbs and sun-kissed hair, is standing in front of Eve in the line. Next to her, in an adjacent line, is Georgia Smith. Boo. That's not the book. Alex is telling Georgia about a boy she Frenched last Friday, a friend of her family who is so fucking hot. Apparently he asked if he could finger Alex in the backyard after dinner, but Alex has explained that she would like to save that experience for when it's definitely love. Georgia is stammering something in reply about that being so true. Georgia's trying not to blush as she does this. If she pretends to be cool about sex talk, then maybe she'll become so. As is so often the case with Georgia, she now overreaches. She says she's considering giving a gobby to the boy who lives next door to her. That's a blowjob, I don't know if you call that. That's a blowjob. To the boy next door to her. Alex is repelled by this crassness. Fingering is one thing, but a gobby? You need to respect yourself more, says Alex. Georgia is humbled. She'll get it right next time. She will. She looks at the ground. Her eyes spy Eve's feet and then scroll up. They notice Eve's leg hair, her burgeoning cellulite, and then they land on the money shot, Eve's pubic hair. This is Georgia's chance to redeem herself in Alex's eyes. This is how she will claw back her own dignity. She will take it from Eve. Nice bush, you girl. Eve tries to avoid Georgia's eyes. This cannot be happening. If she ignores it, then it might not be real. But Georgia will not have this. Georgia will command Alex's attention. She steps closer to Eve, so close they're almost touching. I said, nice bush, new girl. There's something almost sublime about the cruelty of preteen girls. The absolute acid of it. Eve would be having an out-of-body experience if not for the fact that she is so inescapably, so inextricably in her own body. Everyone is watching now, everyone is invested. How will the new girl react? She's already proven herself to be brash in English class, but this time it's not her brain that's being spotlit, it's her appearance. And even the cleverest girls usually crumble when forced into this unfortunate starring role. Nell is trying not to express her intense interest as she stands at the back of the line, intensely interested. Eve is scarlet. One part of her wants to run and hide, but the other cannot contain the red-hot coil of anger, the defensiveness that comes with the shame. Thank you so much, says Eve, the tremble in her voice almost imperceptible. Georgia's eyes squint, her collective breath is drawn. Eve continues, and Thanks for taking the time to really stare at my vagina. I'm flattered, but not interested. In the silence that follows, you can hear a tampon drop. It's difficult to read the expression on Georgia Smith's face simply because she herself is unsure how to respond. She could not have predicted this retort, the audacity of it. Alex Robbins' jaw has dropped, but she's not helping her so-called friend. She too is waiting to see what will happen next. Georgia's self-protective impulse finally kicks in. With a nuance that only Georgia Smith could achieve, she snarls, "Oh my God, you fucking lesbian." Eve has now clocked Nell observing her from the back of the line. She's noticed Nell's small but not vindictive smirk. Eve looks to Nell, then rolls her eyes in Georgia's direction as if to say to Nell, "Go on, watch this. I want you to watch me." Eve directs her gaze back to Georgia. "Au contraire, mon ami. It seems you are the one who'd like to munch my carpet." Eve smiles sweetly. Georgia's face crumples. She intuits that she's been gravely insulted. She understands there's been an accusation of lesbianism, but she cannot fathom how the power shifted. She cannot work out how she has ended up on the losing side here. She looks to Alex. Alex snorts laughter, turns away from Georgia. No one else is laughing. They are too afraid of Georgia's wrath. "What's going on here, girls?" The oblivious PE teacher, who had been watching the girls already in the pool, has finally noticed that something is up. "Nothing, miss," the girls recite in unison. The teachers mustn't be made aware. They cannot know. A war has started here today. After the lesson, back in the changing room, Eve is a pariah. Those who may have been quietly interested in courting her friendship earlier in the day are no longer so. Nell comes to stand next to Eve. "I'm Nell," she whispers. And that was fucking amazing. Something else the teachers do not know. An alliance has been forged here today.
So, my first question was going to be what a gobby?
Yeah, it's a gobby.
Yeah, okay. But you answered it, so that's great. I don't need to do anything. You write childhood voices like so well. Like it's so beautiful. And this novel, for people that don't know, kind of goes between their childhood and their coming of age and then their adulthood, kind of in their 20s and 30s. And I'm curious how it was to develop these voices simultaneously for these characters, and which felt, I don't know, harder, or what were the things that you came up against?
Yeah, so I started writing the book at the beginning. I knew that I wanted the book to, but I also knew I wanted the book to kind of start at the end, so sorry, confusing. I knew I wanted the book to begin with Eve, who was 30, to be looking after her child, Lake, who was 7, and I wanted the reader to know that Nell, the co-parent of this child, is missing. And so the book is kind of structured like a mystery. And so I wrote that scene first, and then it was a question of writing backwards into understanding. And so I have found, when I'm trying to understand what a character's like as an adult, I generally speaking go back and try to imagine how they were like in high school.
Really? Even if you're not writing?
Even if I'm not writing it, just as a writing exercise, just to see, because I feel like we change, but do we change that much? Like, we're kind of like, we don't, you know, and if you're the person who's like, you know, pulling the fire alarm in science class, that's indicative of how you're going to be now. And so for Eve and for Nell, I went back and I started writing scenes of them in high school so I could understand what they were going to be like when they were adults, which I was planning on writing about. And then it kind of became more apparent to me that the scenes I was writing of them as they were kids were actually really central to the book as a whole. And so that's where I kind of began writing those early scenes of them in school. And what was the rest of the question?
Oh my god. I suppose like which one felt like more natural? What were like the difficulties that you came up with in kind of navigating these different voices?
I think writing writing kids is the most fun. I really liked writing children. Because even now they're 12 when we meet them, you've just met them. And when you're 12, you have some understanding of how the world works, but you don't have all the context. You know bits of how the world works, and you know bits of discourse, and you might have heard of a band but not know how they fit into the chronology of music. It's all kind of bits taken randomly. You can't make sense of it yet. But you also at that stage are a mixture of intense earnestness, because the feelings you feel when you're a child and a teenager are the most well, for me at least, the most intense. It's I was just like a wrecking ball of emotion. And so you're kind of balancing, trying to understand the world, trying to speak your feelings truthfully, but also understanding slowly that the discourse of adults is all about obfuscation and hiding how you actually feel. And so it was really fun for me to try and write these characters, really wanting to say what they mean to each other, but also just trying to appear cool. They're playing roles to each other, and I think that even now the special thing is those roles. Well, they don't drop all the way because the whole book is about how they should really just talk to each other. But they drop a little bit, and that's that special moment when they can kind of speak to each other truthfully. And then writing adults is a lot easier.
Okay. You said that you found the childhood bits became really central to the story. What was it about them that became central? Was it this understanding of their voice, or was it the kind of frictions that they were going through?
Well, the narrative as it's structured, the childhood and the teenage experiences of these characters is the emotional core of the book. And kind of everything that happens when they're young influences the choices that they make as they grow up. And then there's more time spent in the novel as when they're young, and then it kind of fast forwards towards the end, because I think time begins to feel it's going a lot faster as you get older. So I don't know, I wrote the book to look at really how early experiences of internalized shame and internalized homophobia and externalized homophobia can really influence the early relationships that we have and the ramifications of that as we grow and grow and grow. And explore the ways that we can overcome or not the wounds that we think define us.
Yes. I want to ask more about that, because that's such a central part of this book and the knottiness with which you grapple with it. But I want to ask first of all, was there a particular character's head that you felt was easier to write in or from? Because the book kind of veers between Eve and Nell's perspective quite a bit. Was there one of them that you felt either more drawn to or more that felt more natural in a way?
I think I actually understood them both well. But so the way the book is written as well is with an omniscient narrator. So the narrator is able to jump into anyone's mind at any point, not just Eve and Nell. It could be someone passing on the street. And so what that means is that we can jump into Eve's mind, see how she's feeling, and then when you're feeling a bit too sympathetic to her, when you're maybe liking her a bit too much, the narrator's boop, and swaps you to someone else and kind of hopefully changes your allegiance. And I think Nell's character, at least, we get less of Nell's interiority. So even though there are two protagonists, we see a lot more of, well, in the first half at least, we see a lot more of Eve imagining what Nell's thinking, and then in the second half it kind of swaps. But the book itself, I understood both voices, but the challenge was more when to add the absences, when to not understand them so you don't understand them.
Yes, yeah. You spoke earlier about this experience of internalized shame that they grow up with, and I think also the ways in which they miss each other, and these gaps and silences that come to define their relationship from quite a young age. I want to ask you about this relationship between love and hurt, and the ways that you explore that in this novel. How do the characters sit with the ways that they hurt each other, and how can we, I feel it's the big question of the book is how do we reconcile like love and hurt within a relationship? How do we love someone who we feel has hurt us? Yeah, and I just thought that was,
Yeah, I mean, that's it. That's the central premise.
Yeah.
Nailed it. I suppose another way to kind of reframe that concept is earnestness and power as well. And so Eve is very clear from like a pretty young age that she's interested in women. She doesn't her kind of interest, at least when she's like 12, is not even necessarily sexual. It's more like that, romantic intensity that I'm getting a few nods that some people have experienced. That kind of like absolute adoration for your best friend, where you just like cannot stand to be apart from them, and it feels kind of almost spiritual. And it's not too much to say. Something goes amiss, and Eve is treated poorly by Nell. And later on, when they kind of come back together, the power has shifted because Eve now has the possibility of being the magnanimous one, the one who can forgive. And I guess what I was really interested in was how having the appearance of magnanimity, of being the good person, can actually enable you to be like the worst person in the world. And also the kind of absolute swirl, as you say, of love and hatred, and love and resentment, and how you can embody, you can have both of those feelings very much at the same time. You can love someone and also just like, and so Eve is like always grappling between those two things, as is Nell in certain ways. And I think, that's just like, the nature of the human condition.
It is, yeah. I think it's also the nature of the sort of communities that they find themselves in, that they are aspiring towards this, like, kindness and community at every turn, and this, like, being close to someone, and, like you say, forgiving them, and that then makes it kind of hard to grapple with the difficult feelings sometimes when you're trying to focus on the act of repair so much that you almost forget about how to repair it.
Absolutely, and like the idea of repair is far more discursive than it is actual. And I guess we talk about that a lot more these days, where people kind of internalize therapeutic language but don't actually do anything.
Yes. I'm not doing it.
So even now are certainly grappling with that.
There was another author I interviewed. There was another author I interviewed a week ago who had written a memoir about like a relationship breaking up. And they said to me something I've thought about so many times since, that they had this idea that loving someone meant not hurting them, and so they had to come to terms with the fact that you could both love someone and hurt someone at the same time. And that was like a really big kind of reframing to them of what love meant. And I think that's quite a similar thing that Eve and Nell I thought about that when I was reading this, right?
Absolutely, and it's made, as you say, that kind of more difficult and sometimes ironic, because their whole like project of their lives, if you will, is to kind of try and formulate a queer utopian vision of family, to reject the ways in which they were raised and to live differently. They probably do gender studies at uni. They've probably like read Munoz and Sedgwick, and they're like, we've got it. And I feel like part of the reason I named the book Chosen Family, it's a big thing to name a book Chosen Family. I'm like taking a term. So if you don't like it, I'm sorry that I've like ruined Chosen Family for you. But I feel like so often it has connotations of, queer joy and community and just absolute adoration and love and finding your people, which it can be, absolutely. And I've experienced that. But I've also experienced the way in which when you treat your friends like their family, you can treat them worse.
Yeah.
You can take them for granted, and you can expect too much of them. And this was, I wanted to kind of see when we're trying to make a non-normative family, it's still a family. So you're still going to have some issues.
Yes. Yeah, that idea you mentioned, kind of like the utopian idea of it, and that was something that really struck me in this book as well. Is there, do you think, a danger to this kind of idealism in a way of like, oh yeah, queer utopia, and then we're putting it on a pedestal that actually erases the natural messiness of like human relationships? Is the utopia almost part of the problem? I really hope not.
Yeah.
Maybe.
No, I think we've reached in this room. But no, I mean, if you actually like read me, Nazis, like queer utopianism is always on the horizon. You never actually get it. But I think that, yeah, I think for a long time, I think queer women in particular, as I'm sure you all know, I don't know the laws actually in the UK, but in Australia, lesbianism was never illegal because it wasn't thought to exist. And so there was, because there was no penetration, it was thought that like the lesbian physical act wasn't real, and you can't like make something illegal. You can't make a identity illegal. You have to make an act illegal. So for gay men, sodomy, as it was. So I think a lot of like lesbian literature and sapphic literature has been about bringing queer female and non-cis male experience into into representation. And there's been a kind of a responsibility, I think, post like Well of Loneliness, obviously, to make it seem really good and fun, which it absolutely is. But I think more and more that queerness is kind of getting more like mainstream in terms of its palatability, that authors and writers and artists are finding space to express a little more nuance, which I think is much needed.
Did you find that you were drawing on a queer archive of literature and art while you were writing this?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, as I was saying before, I thought I was going to be an academic. R.I.P. And I, did my honours thesis at uni was on the radical potential of the androgynous lesbian in literature.
That's really hard.
My master's thesis looked at anti-neoliberal gal pals
Wait, who are they?
in fiction.
Which one?
Oh, I mean, was looking at like contemporary British fiction. So you have, your Bobby and your Frances from Conversations with Friends. You've got Sophia and I can't remember the name of her lover in Hot Milk by Deborah Levy. And then I was looking at George and her girlfriend in Ali Smith's How to Be Both.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And then my PhD was like also looking at gay stuff. So I've been thinking about it for a while, and I think my entry point into queer literature was at a bookstore in Sydney called The Bookshop. It's a queer bookshop, and it actually just closed down after like 50 years, which is a real shame. But I walked in there as like a baby. I thought I was a lesbian at the time. I now identify as bisexual, but that's whatever. And I said, I think I might be gay. And they were like, we can help you. And they went around the store and they picked like 20 books for me to read, and that was my like introduction. And so it was The Well of Loneliness. It was some pretty sad stuff, obviously Virginia Woolf. But then there was a really beautiful book called Patience and Sarah by Alma Rootsong, which was had a happy ending, so that was nice. And then I feel like this book, Chosen Family, is definitely an homage to all the queer novels I have absolutely loved. I feel like it specifically, this book owes a huge debt to Ali Smith's first book, Like. Have you read that?
No.
It's a fabulous book, everyone should go read that. And it's about two women. They start in Inverness, actually, because that's where Ali Smith is from, and one day I think we'll be friends. They kind of have this really intense relationship, and then something happens, and we don't know what it is, and there's also a child involved. And the novel's kind of structured quite differently to mine, but part of me writing this was wanting to take that and kind of modernize it and make it my own. So I'm in huge debt to Adam Smith in particular.
That's really lovely. It made me think as well of Patricia Highsmith's The Price of Salt, like Carol, which I think was the first, maybe this is, but I think I read that it was one of the first, at least, mainstream books to feature a lesbian relationship that had a happy ending, and that ends up with them together, spoilers for Carol. But that's like really, how do you move towards a happy ending while not erasing the messiness of it? I think that's sort of what this book is also grappling with in some way.
Yeah.
Which is really lovely.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you how it ends. It's really good though.
I love it. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the concept of family. Like you say, it's a very big title, it's a very big trope, both in literature, both in sort of like queer culture and queer politics. How do the different characters relate to the concept of family, and how do they want to subvert it?
Yeah, so I mean, Eve, the like alternative title for this novel was Mummy Issues. Because Eve has her mum, Emerald, is kind of like she's a single mum. She came from money and has kind of lost that status that she feels like she used to have. And she is biologically a mother, but she just doesn't quite know how to do maternal warmth or the things that you would expect from like a normative mum. And so she kind of, forgets to buy milk, but will have really cool tops. And what that means for Eve is when she's growing up, she doesn't really have someone looking after her, really. And she is resenting that. And as children do, she's imagining how could this all be different? And also, like, when she's young, she's like clearly in love with her best friend. So she comes up with this little plan, I'm not spoiling anything, it's pretty early, where she's like, why wouldn't you just have a baby with your best friend? Why do people think that you have to have a baby with a romantic partner? Because romance can go so horribly wrong. And we can expect too much from people, and people break up, and then it hurts the child. And why couldn't you just turn to someone who is your platonic soulmate, you share their values, and raise a child like that? And then part of her is saying that because she really believes it, and part of that is saying it so she could then be close to Nell. So it's like, and so she's got that. And then meanwhile, Nell's parents, Ondine and James, are consultants.
Yes. Yeah. And that will do it. Yeah. So they find feelings kind of gauche and don't respect displays of earnestness, and they're really they have some really problematic views about like socioeconomic hierarchies. And so Nell actually just genuinely really detests her parents. It's a bit more clear cut. She just thinks they're bad people, which they are. And so she wants to make a family differently too. But they have these grand ideas, and then they try and actualize them, and it becomes a bit more complicated than the ideal. Yeah, I wanted to kind of ask about friendship. I love friendship. So I wanted to talk
You
more
wrote
about
a whole book about it. Like, you're actually the expert. I just made it up. You did a non-fiction book about it.
No, you didn't make it up. I think it's really, really good. But I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about, like these structures. Like, we put these name structures on things, right? Like, this is romantic. It's like romantic in a queer way. This is platonic. This is a family. Like, we're kind of boxing things up in different ways. And I think it's really, really interesting the way that Eve is so insistent that a family based on platonic friendship can't fall apart, because friendships don't end, which they can do sometimes. And I'm really curious why you think we are, as a society, so quick to erase the instability of friendships, and how does that then affect, I think particularly like queer people, women, like people that have like friendship a lot more in their lives, the complexity of their sort of emotional relationships.
Why do we erase the
Yeah, why
instability
do
of
we?
friendship?
Yeah, or like the difficulties of it. Like, why do we tend to like romanticize it in such a way or put it on a pedestal?
Well, I mean, I think the most like obvious answer to that is like, as a society, we live. Newsflash: we live in a heteronormative society that really values the man-woman kind of unit, and so that is the unit that gets the most screen time in film and in literature. And we see we know the trials and tribulations of those kind of relationships because they are the tropes of every film we've ever seen. And friendship gets far less screen time because it's seen as like an addendum to the most important relationship, which is man-woman. But if you put that, which is like a pretty like simplistic view, but if you put that aside, I think there's a childish part of each of us that knows what I was talking about before, which is the absolute joy of finding a soulmate and a friend. And we really, really want to hold on to that ideal, because I think we kind of know in our souls, even though the world tells us, romantic relationships are the most important, women at least, kind of really, really, really value those relationships. And we want to have a kind of utopian vision because it makes us handle the world. It brings solace to everything else that's going on. But I mean, in terms of female friendships in film and literature, like there's not nothing.
No.
I mean,
yeah.
I think Girlfriends is one of my favorite films.
Yeah.
I think that is such a fabulous representation of a complex friendship. I mean, Frances Ha, brilliant. So there's not nothing, but I mean, actually, you're the expert, so why do you think? Seriously.
I think, it's interesting that you mentioned Girlfriends and Frances Ha, because they're two of the ones that I wrote about in the breakup chapter. And I think it's very interesting how almost every single friendship text actually is about like the knottiness of female friendships, or the good ones at least, even though socially we tend to idealize them. If we think of like Elena Ferrante,
I mean, that's a pretty naughty.
Yeah, that's very naughty. Yeah, they have quite a life together. And yeah, it's interesting that actually they are fraught because they're a relationship. They're another way of relating to a human being.
Yeah. I mean, Mila and Lenny were just gay. That's like a lot of time.
There's also that, yeah. But it's these queer-coded female friendships as well. There's another book, sorry to keep mentioning other books, there's another book coming out here at least next month called Strange Loves by Sarah Hastin. And it's also about like another female friendship that sort of is very, very close and then breaks apart. And in it they talk about like that feeling of when you're so close to someone, it almost puts too much on it in a way. And like these very queer-coded relationships that aren't allowed to then become actually queer, and the sort of frictions that causes. And I thought about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Apologies for the wankiness of the words that I'm about to use. But I often think in terms of like lesbian relationships in novels and in films, there is something palimpsestuous about it. So
that reaction.
if anyone doesn't know what palimpsest is, back in the day, when you used to like write on parchment with ink, and you couldn't just like go to the shop and buy more paper, you might decide to kind of try and erase the original, like rub out the original ink, and then write kind of in the opposite direction to the original writing, and then so you've kind of got two texts, but you can only really see one. And then over the years, like the process of oxidization happens, where the ink that you've erased actually begins to come back up through the surface, and it begins to kind of merge with the top text. And so it's kind of a question of, what can you read first, or what came first, what you could see first, or what was written down first. And it's a problem with interpretation because everything's really mixed up, it's just physically hard to read. And that's kind of how I see female friendships, especially queer female friendships in good books and films. You see that kind of involution of women where they are of each other and separate, and that's what makes it so confusing. And that's what Elena Ferrante does so well, which is the confusion between wanting to be your friend and wanting to be with your friend.
Yes, yeah, and also the resentment of that sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like not feeling like you have your own identity,
Yeah.
but also not wanting your own identity.
Yeah, I'm very happy, like ensconced in the consciousness of my best friend.
Yeah. I was going to bring up, you use like a really beautiful metaphor throughout this novel of like the trick mirror, which is exactly this, right? Where they look at each other and they're like, oh, I'm seeing myself, but I'm also not seeing myself. And that idea of, like a porousness of boundaries, I suppose, like friendships that are based on almost an absence of boundaries, I think are like so interesting because there's something, not to get therapeutic about it, but like unhealthy about that. But there's also something really beautiful about that and really formative.
Yeah.
It was just
No,
great
it
question.
can absolutely be both, and you're right. And like the dexterity that like one requires is to know when it goes from like beautiful cohesion to like toxic, which is tricky.
It is tricky. I have one more. I'm just gonna check time. I have one more question, and then I'm gonna hand over to you guys. So like I feel like we've talked about a lot of the big ideas. But something I really want to stress about this book is that it's very funny. It's like really, really fun to read. What role does humour play in your writing? Is it always a register that you find yourself in? How does it kind of play with your often quite difficult ideas?
Yeah, I think, in all of life, as we know, comedy and tragedy, two sides of the same coin. The saddest things are usually the funniest and vice versa if you have enough imagination. And for me, I think humour is if it works, if you find it funny, the circuit breaker. It's the thing that can draw you out of a situation and make you fully see it differently. It can jerk you out of one reality and put you into another. And so with, the two books I've written, I see it as actually like really important for the story, but also just for the reader to have levity throughout, because life isn't just all sad. It simply isn't. There is joy. Even when it's shit, there is laughter, hopefully. And I love reading really sad books, don't get me wrong. But it's something maybe about my personality, I just can't do it. I break. Like if I'm writing like something like awful happening, there has to be a moment that punches through, just as in life you can be in your worst depressive state and you could like see someone fall over and that's just like objectively funny. It just is. And also, not to get too schmaltzy, but like it's a big ask to get for a reader to choose your book. There are lots of books. They choose your book, which is amazing, and then it's going to take them hours and hours of their life to read it. You're asking a lot of people, and so for me, I want my readers to think about complex emotions and dwell in the turmoil of youth, but also I want you to have a really good time. And I'm having a good time when I'm writing it. I have a lot of fun when I write, and I hope that comes through.
Yeah, it really does. It really, really does. I'm really excited for you all to read it. I'm going to hand over to you. I think this microphone is going to be handed over to you. Yes? Yes. So we have like a little roving mic. Please put up your hands, and I will hand this over. And I really was not joking about picking on you, so I would, yes, there we go.
Very brave, thank you.
Hi, so first of all, Green Dot broke me in the best way possible, thank you for the trauma. But my question was, so second books are notoriously hard, and that is something I have had a lot, something I've experienced myself. So I was wondering, what gave you the push to write a second book? Because I feel like there's often a sentiment of, it's like selfish sentiment of this is my magnum opus, how can I do something ever again? I was just wondering what made you metaphorically pick up the pen again.
Yeah. Less metaphorically and more practically, my wife and I bought an apartment and we have a mortgage. So I needed to pay that. But no, with that first book, it takes your whole life to write, right? Like you've got everything you've ever experienced and you want to put it into this book. And like all the feelings you've ever had, and it takes a long time. And you know, Green Dot was in a way that it was a lot of thought and a lot of feelings of many years coming into a book. And then you've written one book and people think, well, you're a writer now, where's the next one? And you're like, well, that one took my whole life. So I don't know, do you want me to live another 30 years? So tricky. I think, first of all, I really love writing. Like it's my favorite place to be, writing. And I know a lot of authors are like, you know, it's hard work, it's devastating and stuff. And like, I respect that, but that's not how I feel. I genuinely don't like it. And so I wanted to start writing again just because that's how I also like work through my own emotions. I never really understand stuff until I write them. And I didn't want to write anything just for the sake of writing something. I wanted it to be a story that I felt like should be told. And for me personally, as an Australian queer woman, I hadn't ever seen any novel in Australia, or even really internationally, that dealt with the trope that we all know, which is when you're queer and you have a big friendship breakup in high school and years later you realise you're in love with that person. And I was like, that needs to be told. I need to do that justice, because we talk about it in flippancies. We all laugh, we're like, haha, I loved my best friend and she broke my heart. That's not funny to me. That's like, it can be. But it's also a lot of other things. So I wanted to bring dignity and nuance and complexity to that. And then the other thing I wanted to think about was a few years back I became a step-parent to my stepson. And children was something I was just thinking about all the time. And I really, really wanted to write a story that looked at queer parenting and alternative family setups. There is a child character in this book who rocks, by the way. I don't know if you mentioned her, Lake. She's my favourite character. So yeah, I found a story that I actually thought needed to be written. And then in terms of second book syndrome, I obviously had all of the neuroses that anyone goes through, thinking I only know how to write one book, I may never write again. And the way I got through that was my wife, who is a musician. And she said to me, she's released many albums, and she said, it will never go away. Every project you ever do will feel like this. It's not just your second book, you'll also not know how to write the third or fourth. So just kind of sit in the not knowing, go for a walk, go to the art gallery, be kind to yourself, it will come. And as usual, she was right.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I really did feel like this book was sorcery, and like on the very first page, before you hadn't read anything, and already I found myself Googling like my best friend from primary school. I didn't know anything yet. I didn't even know the character's name yet when I was doing that. And I tell you, the penultimate page, I had no idea what was going to be on the last page. Like, this book is amazing. How long did it take to write? What was the hardest part? And what do you do next?
Thank you, that's so nice. Jesus, sorry, how long did it take to write?
What was the hardest part?
Okay. So it took about a year to write, which I know isn't that long, but I'm in an extremely lucky position, and like almost no authors I know are in this position, so I feel like I should flag it that I'm extremely lucky that writing is my full-time job. So it was a lot easier to write quickly when I wasn't also working 4 days a week and doing a PhD, which is how I wrote Great Dot, which took longer. The hardest bit to write. I am not a very organised person. And so for me it was the timeline of it. Because with Great Dot it's written chronologically pretty much, even though there's like a narrator talking about the past. It kind of just is pretty linear. Whereas this book switches between timelines. And so then you have to be like constantly aware of, well, this happened in this timeline, so that if I reveal this here, how is that going to affect there? It's a little bit more like beautiful 90. So that was challenging. That was really challenging for me, and in hindsight I should have helped myself more. Because I just have one Word document and my mind. Like that's all I do. I don't have anything else. And like after I wrote it, I talked to people and they're like, you don't have like a spreadsheet or like a mind map, and I probably should have done that. Oh, sorry, and then was it what's next? Sorry, that was the third one. Yeah. I can't say too much because I myself don't know, but vibe-wise, it's kind of begun. Vibe-wise, it is like Jermaine Greer meets Monty Python. That's all I can say. Yeah.
Hi, sorry, I read only the first half of the book, but I have...
First half.
Yeah, I know. So I want to ask you a little bit about how you play with the structure and like to kind of maybe mislead the reader a little bit with certain tropes. So I will tell you very honestly, when there is a discussion in the kitchen with Marcus, and he's like, oh yeah, when you last had sex with Bridget, and I was like, what the heck is Bridget?
Yeah.
Because I feel like the way it was constructed, I think it's just those tropes where it's saying, oh yeah, they fell in love, they're best friends, they fell in love, and they had a baby.
Yeah.
I just completely, for me, because you do mention earlier, like, oh yeah, they are co-parents.
Mm-hmm.
For me, for some reason, I just read that as like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
that was a lot.
I tricked you.
So I want to ask you kind of like, how did you play with the structure to make those things kind of like not mislead, but kind of make the reader maybe go into certain tropes?
Yeah.
Maybe you want them to imagine, and then just cross their swords.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that it worked. Yeah, I mean, it was, as a reader, you fill in the gaps, you know? You kind of think, well, I don't have this information, so I'll kind of take an educated guess, and that reveals a lot about you as a person as well, which I love as a reader myself. And so, yeah, with even Nell and the nature of their relationship, it's never really specified until quite late in the novel when we find out some other things. And I guess that allows the reader to kind of have either a utopian or a nihilistic kind of view of the world. You could be, you know, hoping for the best, or you can be thinking it probably didn't work out well. And that's the fun of it. And I feel like with Green Dot was like a similar kind of thing in the sense that with both books you kind of know how it's going to end at the beginning, but you don't know like the nature of it. You kind of know the what, but you don't know the how and the why. And that's what's more interesting to me. It's like a murder mystery where you know who the killer is, but you don't know why the fuck he did it. And that's kind of how I structured it. And in terms of like how did I like literally do that, I kind of realized to my answer over here because I don't really know. It was just a matter of like reading, writing, and then rereading again the next day, and then seeing that I'd made a terrible mistake, and then a revelation that occurred there actually spoiled like four kind of sections later. And that's also where you just have to give full credit to editors and copy editors. My editor, Ali, in Australia, is a legend, and I am not like the most factual. Like I just be like, the jacarandas were blue, and she's like, babe, it's winter. Like, there's no jacarandas. Like, you know that, you live in Sydney. And I'm kind of like, thanks, Ali. So yeah, Ali LeBeau gets a lot of credit for that, actually.
Well, thank you so much, I look forward to reading the end.
Thank you.
I think we can take one more question. If there is any more question?
I see one right.
Hello. I write like queer plays, and I find with the stuff that I write that a lot of queer people want you to sort of pick like an identity or a struggle, and you can't serve everyone in the things that you write. Someone's always going to get disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's always going to feel like they're not being represented.
Yes.
This was the first time that I have read about a non-normative family, which I also want to be a part of, like in my personal life.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering kind of how you chose like this subject to sort of focus on, and then with the ending being sort of, because I got a little defensive, because I was like, well, it's not going very well, and I have this idea in my head of like everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
But then I did appreciate the fact that like, just because you choose something that's non-normative, it doesn't mean it's not gonna it's gonna be perfect.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering like how you sort of came across that subject and what interested you about sort of choosing that specific like non-normative identity in queerness.
Yeah, I mean, I think it gets back to what we were talking about before, which is like, you know, showing that gays can be annoying too. I think it's like very powerful and important work. Like I was so annoyed actually the day after Chosen Family came out in Australia, there was a reductress like meme and it was like woman finding Chosen Family annoying too. And I was like, but I mean, it's just, I write about what I'm interested in. And for me, I'm a step parent to a beautiful child who, I generally just say I'm his parent, but for purposes of now, step parent. And so he has me, he has his birth mother, who's my partner, and he has my partner's ex, who is his other mum, and now she has a new partner. And so, you know, there's kind of like 4 maternal figures, and I hadn't also seen that represented in terms of how that works, but also how broader society reacts to it. I've had some of the most fascinating experiences of my life in the past few years being a parent at school. It's amazing. Like, well, being a parent, but being the queer parent. It's fun. Like, people expect so much. They kind of sometimes, you know, want to be like really, really welcoming, and they're like, I think there's like a scene in the book, you know, they're like, I love making Rapinoe. It's like, or they're, you know, a bit weird about it. And so I really wanted to kind of play with that in the novel. And I wanted to see, as well in those setups, that it can be really hard to negotiate space for new maternal figures when there are already maternal figures. We kind of presume, oh, like more mothers is good, and it is, but that doesn't mean it's going to be easy and that people aren't going to resent each other, and that, you know, kind of, you know, the original parents will like kind of want to protect their space to the additions, and then the people who feel like they're additions will then be really resentful because they're actually doing work. Like, these are all things that I clearly care about myself. And so, yeah, I wanted to give that setup the same level of interest and care and thought as heterosexual families get in fiction all the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your beautiful answers and for talking to me. That was so lovely. I believe there's a signing. There is a signing. Is it just outside?
I can tell you a little bit more about
Yeah, we're going to. Why am I doing this? I'm going to hand over to Al, who will tell you what's signing.
Thanks again for joining Lighthouse tonight and celebrating this gorgeous wee book and welcoming Maddie to Scotland. So I'm just going to ask you guys to stay seated for now. If you'd like to buy a copy of Maddie and Annie's books, we will have a table of them just on your way out, so it's just that table over there underneath the stairs. Sorry, microphones are not good for me. Maddie and Annie will be signing books at the table at the top of the stairs, the way you came through in, so the second table down. We'll just let them leave the room first, and then you can join them after. Before you go, just a reminder that Wuthering Dykes Book Club will be selling tote bags at the book table. Thank you so much for joining us, guys, in this great event. It's been wonderful working with you. They'll be meeting to discuss the book on the 2nd of February at 7 p.m. in Austin Lee. Please do join them. At Lighthouse, we have another queer book event on Tuesday, 17th of February. The wonderful Celine Haddad, who wrote Guapa, will be joining us to talk about his new book, Floodlines. Tickets are available on the website now, and if you're curious, we have a couple copies for sale as well. So thank you so much.